Hi everybody and welcome to another piano review here at Merriam Pianos. My name is Stu Harrison and today we are checking out Kawai's KDP70 all on its own. We have already done a comparison video of it against the KDP110, but this is a very deserving, very interesting, high-value digital piano that we wanted to take a peek at all on its own, so that's what we're doing today. We're going to be talking about its tone generation, the speakers, the action, some of the other features that it has loaded on board, and so we really hope you enjoy what we've got to offer today. If it's the first time that you've stopped by the channel, we would also sincerely appreciate it if you subscribed. It'd help us to keep building a community of music lovers, and certainly hit that notification bell because we want you to know every single time we come out with one of these videos, and we do so quite regularly. So without further ado, let's get started with this KDP70 right away. So we are in front of the KDP70, and this is the little brother to the KDP110, and there are some similarities and there are some differences. The biggest similarities between the KDP70 and the KDP110 are definitely going to be their interfaces. They're literally exactly the same. The other thing that's going to be very, very similar is a lot of the tone engine and the number of sounds and the types of effects that you can get on these two instruments. They're very, very similar. They have 192 notes worth of polyphony, so that's the first spec that we're going to share with you. Both the KDP70 and the KDP110, and of course we've done a comparison video, so to see a better, I guess, side-by-side between these two instruments, please do check out that video. But we've got 192 notes worth of polyphony on the KDP70. That means that you have plenty of bandwidth to be able to play this instrument with a single layer of sound or even with two layers of sound without really any fear of the tone generator suddenly coughing up and stopping, sounding some of the instruments that you had already sustained, probably through the use of the sustain pedal. And again, if you want to know a little bit more about polyphony, we've done a video on that, and you can check it out so you know exactly what we're talking about. So 192 in terms of that. When it comes to the wattage and the speaker system on the KDP70, we do have, well, I should say, for one, it certainly has one of the largest amplifiers of any instrument in its class. It's a 16-watt stereo amplifier in the KDP70. And so there is a lot of power. It's actually a very surprising amount of power when you're playing it at about 3/4 volume, which is usually where I prefer to play most digital pianos, is about somewhere in the 2/3 to 3/4 range. You're getting lots of bass presence, you're getting lots of clarity in the mid-range, and actually there is this surprising amount of attack and really strong treble. I wouldn't say it's like a piercing treble. It's just this. It's a very full, complex treble. It almost reminds me of the treble that you get on like a 6 to 7 foot grand that has a really, really pronounced duplex effect on it, duplex scale effect on it. Anyway. Besides kind of just the numbers that go along with describing this sound, there are a few things about the KDP70 that also stand out besides just the size of its amplifier. The other thing is that it's using individual 88-note samples. This is very, very unusual for the price range, and so that's why it's worth pointing out, because it actually does make quite a difference. One of the it's almost a bit of a paradox. One of the things that digital pianos have been challenged to try and reproduce over the years is actually the imperfections that you get on an acoustic piano rather than all of their perfections. Because of course, if every single note was produced exactly the same way and the only difference in real life was literally just the frequency and the tension of that string, every note would basically behave the same. But on a real piano, it doesn't. You've got strings that are wound with really thick copper. You've got strings that are sort of a combination of 3 strings being played at once. All of these things produce very subtle differences from one range to another, and even from one note to another. And it's this combination of richness and slight differences in all of those notes that give us what we think of as a piano. And so digitals have not always been great at reproducing that because there's almost an infinite possibility of all of these, parts of the sound playing around in the air. One easy way to get around that is actually just to sample a real piano. And that's what we're talking about right here, individual note samples. Because when you go on a real piano and you play all 88 notes and you are recording all 88 notes, you are going to pick up every nuance of every single one of those notes. Now there are more complex models that give us both, the core sample and then all sorts of other layering on top of other nuances. Roland does this very well with the Supernatural piano as well as their V piano. Kawai has done this really well in some of the more advanced versions of the harmonic imaging. But even on the KDP70, even at the entry point into the range, they've still got the individual 88 note samples. So every single one of those notes when I'm playing it is actually playing back a sample of that actual note being played on a 9-foot concert grand. And so you get all sorts of very, very subtle differences between those notes, and those imperfections when you combine them together really do make a difference when you're playing that digital. It does create the illusion of an additional layer of realism and just interest for the ear. And so it's really cool because most of the time what you're getting in the price range that the KDP70 occupies will be instruments where sometimes you'll just have a mono sample rather than a stereo sample of each note. The other thing you often get is that 1 every 3 or 1 every 4 notes might be sampled, and then in between there, they're basically just stretching the sample. And so that sort of cuts down on the amount of memory that the instrument needs, as it just sort of creates a slightly easier time for the production team to get it out there at a lower cost. So let's actually listen to the KDP70 now. So what we're hearing right now is the concert grand sound. I find a lot of character in there, and I find a lot of ability to sort of push it into a brighter range with a higher dynamic and a lower range. So really quite satisfying as a piano player. It has 13 sounds on it. It's really easy to manipulate your way through the sounds on the 70. And there's 2 ways to do it, really. You can press and continue to press the sound select, and that will basically just step one by one and cycle through the whole set of sounds. So here's our first sound. Here's the second one. Third one. And fourth one. Now we're into the electric pianos. Kind of a DX sound. And then that left pedal is always pre-programmed to kind of start up the rotary speaker, which is really fun. And hitting it again, turns it back off. You can sort of hear it slowing down. And then church organ. and then harpsichord. Strings, slow strings. I guess that's choir. And then this is sort of another pad. There's a second way that you can select the sounds other than just going through those notes, and that is that those 13 sounds are assigned to, I think, the first 13 white keys on the bottom. Pretty sure they're just the white keys. I guess we'll find out here. So this is the first one. Yeah, just the white keys. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I think if we want piano on that pad as a layer, you can press the sound select, hit the first note, and then hit the second one, and we should have a layer. Go. Let's try this one. In addition to all of the sounds that you've got on there, you also have the ability to make some adjustments to the reverb. You actually have damper resonance on this instrument, which is also kind of crazy. That's another unusual feature for a piano in this price range. And then all of the other normal stuff like the transpose and the metronome. So you've got all of those things kind of built in. But in terms of sound, really where the KDP70 stands out is those few things that we've just mentioned. For its price range, 192 notes worth of polyphony, a 16-watt stereo amplifier, damper resonance, and individual 88-note key sampling. Those are all on their own somewhat unusual for this price range. Not saying that you can't find these things on any other instrument, but when you look at it as a total package, it's really rare that you're going to find all of those sort of sound, piano, tone engine focused features found in a single instrument for under $1,000. So, if we were looking for a strong argument as to why the KDP70 deserves to be on the list, if you're also comparing this to, say, Yamaha P125s or the Korg, S3000, or even if you were looking at this in comparison with maybe some other portable units, or you're looking at a Korg, there's your kind of bundle of arguments as to why that should at least be on the research list. So we're going to throw some of those specs up on the screen for you, and then we're going to move right on to action. Thank you so much for being with us. The KDP70 has a lot in common with the ES110. One would think that the KDP110 and the ES110 would have more parallels because of how they've named them. That would only be logical, and it's definitely not true, which is just kind of weird. The KDP70 actually has more in common with the KDP110, or with the ES110, than the KDP110 does. And one of those commonalities is the action. So this is the responsive hammer compact action. It's the first generation of this action. The second generation of this action, which goes into the KDP110, has a triple sensor. This is actually a dual sensor, or 2-point sensor. And where that comes into play is usually more to do with recording or professional applications than it does just with casual playing. But it's still worth mentioning because every once in a while, we'll be talking about an instrument like this and somebody wants to put it into a studio, and you got to know about this stuff. But for most people who are shopping for this price point, dual sensor versus triple sensor is realistically not going to make a huge impact on the playing experience. But if you're looking for super even, MIDI output, and also I guess if you're going to try to squeeze some heavy duty, classical playing out of here where you need lots of control over multiple dynamic levels, the triple sensor can make a difference, and that's maybe an argument for looking at the KDP110 or the CN29 if you're, sticking within the Kawai line. So back to the action. So we've got the responsive hammer compact action, so RHC. And what do we get? What don't we get? Well, what we do get is we've got a very nice key surface on the top, both on the white and the black key. You've got sort of a micro texture on there. It does not have escapement. Again, so if you're thinking about an advanced player or even somebody who's going to be doing a lot of back and forth between this instrument, maybe as a secondary or a practice instrument, and an acoustic piano, you may find that somewhat disruptive to have such a mechanical difference in the feel of the keys. For people who are just starting out, probably really isn't that much of a negative. So we don't have, we've got dual sensor, we do not have any escapement on there. But another thing that is a very nice thing, and I would say this is kind of universal to a lot of the Kawai actions, is the bottom of the key bed is very well cushioned. So you'll hear or you'll read about a lot of people on forums or on product reviews talking about how loud the action is. They're obviously not talking about the digital sound output. They're talking about the actual mechanical noise that the movement of the key makes itself. And by and large, on average, the Kawais tend to be quieter because of how they cushion those keys. So there's a lot, it's a higher level use of real felts in the action, generally speaking, whereas a lot of the other ones use rubber or synthesized rubbers, silicones. And the repetition speed is quite decent. You know, that's repeating really quite well. You start to feel when you are playing a little bit more aggressively that RHC action does have a little bit more side-to-side flex or lateral flex, as I refer to it, on the black keys than I would like. That's something that really strengthens quite a bit when you get into the RH3, which is the action that they have on, well, several digital pianos, but the next one up that has it is the CN29. But for the intended audience, and I make this point in a lot of my videos, right? You can't measure a $10,000 keyboard by the same standard as you're measuring a $1,000 keyboard, because these things are built for different audiences, and you sort of have to adjust your standards and adjust your perspective every time you dive into, a new corner of the market. And so for the audience that this is intended, I think this is one of the best actions that's available out there. You all know that I have, a bit of a love affair with the PHA4 action, which is a Roland action, which is also available in this price category, but they're very different actions. And so if you have any experience whatsoever playing a piano or a digital piano beforehand, you're going to want to sample those two side by side if you possibly can, because in my view, in this price range, those are the best two actions that money can buy. And for somebody who is just starting out and it's going to be something like this, or a really old used piano that you're picking up off Craigslist or Kijiji with a very inconsistent action that's not going to behave the same from key to key, I have no problem whatsoever recommending this to new families and new students. So that's our discussion on the action. We'll come back for one more quick segment where we're going to talk about the other connectivity and the cabinet and a few other things. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll be back in just a second. So we've covered the tone, we've covered the action. Now let's move on to the last discussion where we're really talking about the cabinetry and some of the other non-musical features and functions of the piano. The KDP70 comes with its own case. It's got a stand, it's got the triple pedal system, and they've done it in a very, well, it's like a matte black, it's a satin black. It's not designed to look like wood. It's almost sort of looks like a bit of an eggshell texture to it, so that's either going to turn your crank or it's not. But what I can say is, having seen these in institutional settings, it's a very durable a very durable finish rather. It only comes in the satin black. That's all that Kawai produces with this. And underneath that finish is exactly the same cabinet that you get on the KDP110. So, you know, it's a use of real plywood and high quality MDFs. The cabinet is always quite well made when it comes from Kawai. It also has a bit of a chrome effect on it. So a lot of digital pianos simulate that brass type effect for a lot of the accent colors. They've gone with silver. And so you've got chrome up here, and you've got chrome pedals. They're actually quite attractive. You've got your requisite dust cover, which is a good thing to use generally when you've got a digital piano. The big missing chunk of functionality here is any sort of digital connectivity. It does have your 5-pin DIN MIDI out ports, which is kind of the old-fashioned circular MIDI out port, so I suppose that's digital in a sense. But in 2020, you know, people are often looking for USB ports, so you can hook this up, you know, directly to a computer or Bluetooth. They had to shave some money off somewhere, and that is where Kawai decided to shave that cashola off. It's not that different in price from the ES110, and so I get that the fact that you are also getting your full cabinet and a bench, you've got to be saving somewhere else. So KDP70, great for somebody who at most just needs a basic MIDI connection. Not so great for people who are looking for an instrument that has a better balance between, say, digital connectivity and some of those other tonal features where clearly Kawai decided not to cut the corners, which, you know, we talked about extensively in the first section of this video. It's got headphone ports. It does not have its own audio outs. So how you've been hearing this instrument today on video is we've actually taken a line straight out of one of the headphone ports. And there are two. There are two, and they are both 1/4 inch, if I'm not mistaken. A few other features that are worth noting. This does have some of the most popular lesson books pre-programmed in. What it means by pre-programmed is that all of the repertoire that are inside those lesson books are available in here for playback, and you can actually select between the right-hand part and the left-hand part and omit some parts so that it makes it a lot easier to practice along with. So that's kind of fun. Kawai also has been shipping digital pianos for years with this feature called Concert Magic, which until I started doing some teaching, honestly, I thought was the dumbest feature ever. Now that I have seen this in work with some, you know, students who are trying to develop some rhythm, I get why it has stayed a popular feature of the Kawai lineup for so long. And I'll quickly demonstrate what this is. So if I turn Concert Magic on, I don't know why they came up with the name Concert Magic, but basically what the function is I can hit any key on here and it's going to play one note at a time, a very popular piece. So this is basically teaching somebody how to hit the piano rhythmically without having to worry about rhythm and the right note at the same time. So, for example, you get the idea. Now, if I also play it, so it will accept the right notes as well, or just for a young student who wants to feel the satisfaction of playing something they recognize and not get frustrated by having to get too many things together at once, this is a really easy first win. And that's the beauty of it. And it's not just Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I think there's a few dozen different pieces in there. You've got Fur-Elise, you've got, you know, a number of the really well-known classics. So you've got the lesson functionality, you've got the Concert Magic, and you've also got a basic recorder. So that wraps up the KDP70. It's a really nice package of features that are very focused on the piano experience. You know, we've already talked about that there's sacrifices being made on the digital connectivity front. I think the action is one of the more basic but well-made actions that's going to be great for a beginner. Not such a great choice for somebody who already is an experienced player. You're going to want to look elsewhere, at least at a different action, and if in the Kawai line, up 1 or 2 notches. But for beginners, or certainly for a utility second instrument, it's a satisfying functional action. You've got a decent, 16-watt stereo speaker, which is one of the largest in its class. Individual note sampling on all of those notes, 192 note polyphony on there as well, and 13 tones to choose from. So that's it. A really interesting, cool option if you are down underneath the $1,000 mark and you're looking for something that has that full cabinet. Oh, there we go with the concert magic again. Hope you've enjoyed the review. Please do check out the comparison with the KDP110, because I think, as always, a lot of this information takes on more meaning when you can put it into context, when you can give it some comparisons with some other instruments. And of course, check out all kinds of other videos on the channel for instruments under $1,000, instruments over $1,000, digitals, acoustics, you name it. We really try and make a video about it. So if it's the first time that you have stumbled upon us here, we would really appreciate it if you subscribed and hit that notification bell. You'll be notified every single time we come out with a new video. Leave us a comment. Please let us know what you thought of the video, what you thought of the instrument. Maybe you already have an instrument and you want to contribute some thoughts there. We try and respond to as many of those as we possibly can. And last but not least, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it, and we will see you back shortly. My name is Stu Harrison. This has been Merriam Pianos.